I did not expect to wake up. That was the first thought I had when my eyes opened. Not relief, not fear. Just a dull, quiet surprise that my body had bothered to continue without my permission. The ceiling above me was low and gray, pressed metal bolted in uneven rows, the kind of construction you put together fast when you do not plan to stay long. I could smell something chemical in the air, sharp and faintly sweet, the way Drawson 4 always smelled since the refineries broke apart in the second month of the campaign. I had grown so used to that smell that the absence of it would have felt stranger than death. I was shackled to a support strut near the back of the room. My left wrist, my right ankle. Whoever had done it knew what they were doing. Not tight enough to cut off circulation, not loose enough to offer any real hope. A professional arrangement. I had cracked ribs, a long gash along my jaw that had clotted and dried into something stiff and uncomfortable, and one boot was missing. I spent a few minutes cataloging these facts the way you do when you have been a soldier long enough to know that panic is just pain that forgot its manners. I breathed slowly. I looked at the room. There were 4 of them, Ashkari warriors, resting in the particular motionless way their kind preferred, sitting completely upright against the far wall with their compound eyes half closed. They were built for this moon in a way that humans were not. 6 limbs, the lower 4 serving as legs when they chose to move fast, and as additional supports when they chose to rest. Carapace plating across their shoulders and chests, deep blue-black, the color of the sky just before it becomes space. I had been fighting them for 11 months. I had never been this close to one before. They ignored me. I was not sure whether that was a good sign or a bad one, so I decided it was neutral, and I closed my eyes, and I tried to figure out what had happened to the rest of my unit. I came up with nothing useful. I remembered dawn. I remembered the ridgeline. I remembered a sound like the world clearing its throat, and then everything going sideways all at once. After that, nothing. Until the ceiling. I stayed very still, and I thought about the fact that I was alive, and I tried to work out what that was worth. On the second day, she came. I say the second day, though I had no windows and no clock. I measured time by the cycle of the light panels above me, which dimmed on a 12-hour rhythm that I assumed was meant to approximate day and night, for the benefit of whichever species had the stronger opinion about such things. She came in at the beginning of the second bright cycle, and she was not like the other 4. Larger, noticeably so, with copper-etched markings along her shoulder plates that I did not know the meaning of then, though I would learn later. She moved differently too, with a deliberate quality, each step placed with the kind of precision that comes not from caution, but from habit, from years of training the body to mean exactly what it does. She crouched in front of me and set something down. A container of paste, some kind of nutrient compound, beige-gray, with a smell that was alien but not unpleasant, and a flask of something warm that steamed in the cool air of the room. She placed them within reach of my free hand. Then she looked at me with those amber compound eyes, which I still could not read the way I could read a human face, and she said nothing, and after a moment she stood and walked away. I stared at the food. My first thought was that it was poisoned. My second thought was that there was no practical reason to poison me when I was already shackled to a wall. My third thought, and this one surprised me, was that she had looked uncertain when she set it down. Not cold, not mechanical, uncertain, as though she was doing something that she had decided on privately, without instruction, and was not completely sure about. I did not eat it that cycle. I sat with it for hours, turning the uncertainty over in my mind, the way you turn a stone, looking at what is underneath. At the start of the dim cycle, when the room was quiet, and the other warriors had gone wherever warriors go, when they are not in the room with you, I picked up the container, and I ate. It tasted like nothing I had a word for, and it was the best thing I had eaten in 4 months. She came back the next morning, and the one after that, and the one after that. Each time she brought food and water. Each time she said nothing. But I began to notice things. The way she adjusted the angle of my shackle on the 3rd day without explanation, tilting it slightly so it pulled less on my wrist bone. The way she left a folded cloth near my face on the 4th day, within reach of my fingers, positioned so it was close to the gash on my jaw. She did not point to it. She did not indicate what it was for. She just left it there and looked away. And I understood that this was how she intended to communicate, by doing things and allowing me to draw my own conclusions. I started talking to her on the 5th day, not because I expected conversation, More because silence, when it goes on long enough, becomes its own kind of pressure, and I needed somewhere to put things. I told her about the missing boot, how it had probably come off in the blast, and how this bothered me more than the ribs, because you can breathe around broken ribs, but you cannot march with one bare foot on crushed rock. I told her the nutrient paste was genuinely good, and that I was not saying that to flatter her, just as a point of information. I told her that the light cycle she was running was slightly too long on the bright end, and it was messing with my sense of time in a way that was probably not intentional, but was fairly effective as an interrogation technique regardless. She made a sound on the 5th day, low, percussive, somewhere between a click and a rumble. My brain, with the confident wrongness that brains specialize in, filed it immediately as laughter. I went still. She went still. Something had changed in the room and we both knew it. Over the days that followed, we built something fragile and strange between us. A way of communicating that was half gesture, half tone of voice. Half the handful of each other's words we managed to establish through patience and repetition, and a considerable amount of failed attempts. I learned that her name was Thesivora. I learned that the copper markings on her shoulder plates indicated something like senior rank in a warrior caste, though the full social meaning of it was more complicated than any single word could hold. I learned that the Ashkari found sustained eye contact with a single person to be an act of profound attention, that looking directly at someone for more than a few moments meant you were considering them seriously. She looked at me directly quite often. In return, she learned that I found her compound eyes genuinely fascinating rather than unsettling, which apparently surprised her. She learned that I had been in this war for 4 years, and that I was tired of it, in a way that had moved past frustration, and arrived somewhere closer to a permanent low-grade sadness, the kind that does not announce itself, but simply sits inside you, taking up space. On the 9th day she told me, in pieces, through our incomplete shared language, that she had not been ordered to feed me. I absorbed this slowly. I turned it over the way I had turned over the food on the 1st day. She had chosen to. There was a word for it in Ashkari, Keth Sorrel. The closest translation she could construct for me was something like, the acknowledgement of a worthy adversary. An old warrior custom. You fed an enemy who had fought with honor, and then surrendered with it still intact. It was not common anymore. Her peers had said things to her about it. Her commanding officer had asked her, once, to explain herself. She had explained herself, and the matter had been set aside, but not forgotten. I sat with this for a long time. Then I said, in the best approximation of her language that I had managed to build over 9 days, thank you. Not strategically, not to soften her toward me, or to create leverage I could use later, just because it was the true and complete response to what she had told me, and I had never been good at saying anything other than the true and complete thing when I had run out of reasons to be guarded. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, in the same fractured combined language we had made, no human has said that before. I asked her what humans had done instead. She told me they had either refused the food entirely or accepted it in silence, and in both cases, they had treated it as a tactic. A move in a game, something to be responded to, not acknowledged. I thought about this. I thought about how easy it is to look at an action and see only its function, what it is trying to get from you, and miss the thing behind it entirely. I thought about how often I had done that myself, over 4 years and 11 months of a war that had trained everyone involved to do it constantly and automatically, because acknowledging the thing behind an action meant acknowledging a person, and acknowledging a person on the other side of a war is dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with weapons. On the 11th day, she told me I was being transferred. I knew what that meant. A rear facility. People whose job was not to feed me, but to extract information from me, professionally and without any particular warmth. I was not naive about what that looked like in practice. I had heard enough from people who had come back from such places, the ones who came back, to know that the next several months of my life were going to require a different kind of endurance than the kind I had been using in this room. That night, I asked her the question I had been carrying since the 1st day. I asked her why she had fed me. She took longer to answer than she had taken for anything else. The room was dim. The other warriors were elsewhere. It was just the two of us, and the permanent chemical smell of the moon, and the distant sound of machinery that never fully stopped. When she finally answered, the answer came in pieces. and I assembled them as she gave them, the way you assemble something from parts that do not quite fit, but are close enough to hold together. I wanted to see, she said, or something near to that, what you were when you were not fighting. I thought about that for a long time. Then I talked for most of the rest of the night. Not about anything strategic, not about the war or the compact or the resource rights in the Valus corridor that had started the whole expensive, grinding mess in the first place. I talked about the actual strange truth of human beings, which is different from what we tell ourselves about human beings, and which I had never had occasion to explain to anyone who was hearing it for the first time with fresh ears. I told her that we name our ships after dead oceans on a planet half the crew has never seen, because we need the names to mean something, even when we cannot remember what they meant first. I told her that soldiers carry seeds in their pockets, not for planting, just for luck, just for the feeling of having something small and alive against the skin. I told her we build monuments to our disasters as readily as our victories, because we believe that the worst things we have survived deserve to be remembered as much as the best things we have done. I told her that we laugh when we are frightened, which sounds like a design flaw, but has kept more than one person alive in more than one dark room. She listened, she asked questions. They were real questions, not polite questions, not the kind you ask to be appropriate, but the kind that come from a mind that is genuinely trying to close the gap between what it knows and what it wants to know. I answered all of them as well as I could. At some point, the conversation became the kind that only happens between people who have nothing left to perform for each other, and I recognized that quality the moment it arrived, because it is rare in ordinary life and almost impossible in war, and I had not felt it in years. Before the bright cycle came back, she did something I did not understand until a minute after it happened. She checked my shackle, ostensibly checked it, ran her lower left hand along the mechanism the way you do when verifying a restraint is secure, and then she walked away. I looked down. The shackle had not been fully re-engaged. There was a gap, a small one, enough. It would have taken me about 40 seconds to work free, and I knew the layout of the room well enough by then to know where the exit was. I sat with that gap for a long time. Then I did not move. I did not move because she had not told me to move, and because she had done this quietly, and without instruction, and at considerable risk to herself. And because that kind of trust, if that is what it was, is not something you can repay with 40 seconds and a sprint for the exit. You can only repay it by understanding what it cost. The transfer came at the next bright cycle. I survived it. The war went on for 3 more years, and then stopped the way wars always stop, not with any resolution, but with an exhaustion that became indistinguishable from agreement. I came home. I did not talk about her to anyone who would have written it down. At the Peace Summit, a neutral station, the kind with no view of anything real, I was standing in a room full of people speaking carefully in 3 languages when I looked across the room and I found her. She was part of the Ashkari delegation, copper marks still on her shoulder plates, a few more than I remembered. She made a gesture I recognized, small, precise. It meant, in the language we had built between us in 11 days on a gray moon that smelled of chemicals, still here. I made it back. I have been carrying that moment around ever since, the way soldiers carry seeds. Not for any particular purpose, just for the weight of it in my pocket, small and alive, proof that something grew in a place where nothing was supposed to.